1 game, 2 hours. Hook me. Spirit of the North. Hello, good day and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Hook Me. And as you could already tell from the intro, this time we're taking a look at Spirit of the North. And first things first, who is it from? So this is being published by Merge Games and was developed by Infuse Studio. And if you haven't heard of them yet, well, quite frankly, I don't blame you because they haven't really released anything of note in the gaming sector yet. They are a rather small studio that used to create 3D assets for the Unreal Marketplace and only recently branched out into gaming. And Spirit of the North seems to be their first title. And so that leads us to the question, well, what exactly is Spirit of the North? So some people would probably describe this as a third-person puzzle platformer. And rightfully so. Well, except you're playing a fox. And others might initially falsely accuse it of being a walking simulator. Me? Well, I mean, I would also call it a third-person puzzle platformer because that's what it is, but also I would call it an explorative adventure, because it feels like so much more than just a simple puzzle platformer. So let's get into the details here. When I started this game, the first thing that caught my eye was the animation of the fur. Honestly, I wasn't too impressed by it. Sure, it's by a tiny indie studio, you can't expect AAA graphics, and honestly it doesn't look bad, it just looked weird. And yet I didn't care, I had already run out of mercy for that day. But while I was already thinking about how I would tear into this game's graphics on the actual Hook Me episode, I suddenly found myself distracted by the sounds of a snowstorm breezing across, and this enigmatic yet adventurous music picking up in the background. And before I knew it, I was controlling this unseeming little fox in the midst of an icy desert. It was actually kind of ridiculous. From 1 second to the next, I was completely enraptured. The sound effects, the music, the environment, the smooth way in which you control the fox, it all comes together so nicely that it's really easy to immerse yourself. And so I was thrown into this vast, snow-covered land without any explanation, and just a huge red trail in the sky. Needless to say, I investigated, and that's where people that only played like 10 or 20 minutes of this game might get the impression that this is a walking simulator. Because honestly, in these first 20-ish minutes, not a lot is happening. To put it bluntly, you follow a spirit fox and occasionally fetch sticks. But unlike actual walking simulators like Myst or Riven, I never felt annoyed or bored with this one. Because despite the somewhat outdated graphics, the environments are just put together so well. They're beautiful to look at. And it's all accompanied by a soundtrack that constantly does a great job of setting the atmosphere. And to be fair, this initial walking sequence frequently gets shaken up by letting you slide through ice tunnels, which is pretty damn fun. And after this initial part, you unlock the fox's first ability and the game opens up more. Because you are then thrown into a bigger area that you're supposed to puzzle your way through using your newly acquired skills. And while the game in and of itself is linear, these areas both encourage and reward exploration. They encourage it simply by their size and design. This is not a game that spoon-feeds the story to you. This is a game that tells a story through its environment that is up to your interpretation. You will often stumble upon abandoned houses, old ruins, broken statues, and you're left to wonder, what happened to this place? What was here before? And remember how I mentioned something about fetching sticks before? Those are the collectibles within the game, and also how exploration is rewarded. You see, there are several staffs scattered throughout the land, and every staff belongs to a shaman skeleton. So you're supposed to find a staff and bring it to a skeleton, which will awaken and cleanse its ghost. And by doing so, you will unlock additional skins for your fox, and there's quite a few collectibles scattered throughout the game. Now, I mentioned that part of its charm is exploration and figuring things out for yourself, but of course there's also an overarching story. Without really trying to spoil anything, the land is being consumed by darkness, and your fox gets infused with light by a spirit. A spirit that also happens to be following you around throughout the game. Think Navi, only not as annoying.
Hey, listen! Hey, listen!
And let's just say you're supposed to drive the darkness back. There's more to it than that, but again, I don't want to spoil anything. And while that may not sound like an award-winning story, again, it's just the way it's all presented that makes it so great. Venturing through the lush grass within this vast mountainous valley, all the while having the trail of darkness looming over your head, is such a humbling experience. It's not flashy, it's not extravagant. It's just a brave little fox and his tiny spirit companion on this voyage of grandeur, eradicating the darkness and bringing light. Next up, the pacing, because believe it or not, in puzzle platformers, pacing is actually a pretty big deal. And I can say that it's done incredibly well in Spirit of the North. New mechanics and abilities are introduced regularly throughout the game, and none of them overstay their welcome. Additionally, they often need to be combined in interesting ways to solve puzzles. As for what abilities and mechanics, all sorts of things. Physics-based stuff like seesaws or geysers that thrust you in the air, and abilities like a dash move or a spiritual form that lets you walk through walls, amongst other things. And these abilities often need to be combined to solve any given puzzle. Now, on the subject of puzzling and riddles, I usually hate that. I hate puzzles. I don't want it in my games. It makes me think, and I don't want to think. Thinking is hard, okay? But here, the puzzles were always just right. They were never frustratingly hard to figure out, and the answer was usually very close by. So I had a surprising amount of fun with it here. That is to say, with the exception of Chapter 7. Chapter 7 was obnoxious. I hated it, and it almost ruined the entire experience for me. Because you are thrown into a huge, and I mean absolutely vast area, and you're supposed to find a bunch of statues hidden within. And to make matters worse, this most expansive area of all is also the least interesting one to explore because it all looks the same. But with that being said, having to push through that obnoxious Chapter 7 made me appreciate the ending even more. And the ending was incredible in many ways that I can't really get into because I don't want to spoil it for you. But let's just say Spirit of the North manages to tell an endearing and memorable story without ever muttering a single word. And so we come to the age-old question, did it hook me? Well, judging by the fact that I played through it in a single sitting, I'd say not only did it hook me, but it reeled me in and threw me back into the gaming ocean before I even knew it. So would I recommend it? That's actually not such an easy question to answer. Here's the thing. This game costs about $20, and it lasted me, a bad puzzler, around 5 hours. If you're going for all the collectibles, you might get up to 7. and there isn't really any replay value to speak of here. So Spirit of the North is a short experience. But let me emphasize that correctly. Spirit of the North is a short experience, because that's really what it is. If you're somebody that can immerse themselves in video games very well, and that doesn't need a story spoon-fed to them, I'd say definitely go for it, because it's a very unique adventure. If you've played Journey and enjoyed that, chances are you'll like this too. And if you're a fan of puzzle platformers, this is a very solid addition to your library. However, trying to look at it as unbiased as I can, as objectively as I can, and assuming that you don't get much out of exploration or the story itself, then you're not exactly getting a lot of bang for your buck. As I said, there's basically zero replay value here, so it's gonna be $20 for 5 to 7 hours of playtime. There's definitely better deals out there. All I can really say is that I personally didn't think I would like it very much. It's not my kind of game, I didn't expect much from it. And yet it is now one of my most memorable gaming experiences in the past decade. So take that however you will. And with that being said, that's it for Spirit of the North. Now available on Steam for €16.79 if you're in Europe, or $19.99 if you're in the US. As always, prices may vary depending on your exact location. And that's it from my side. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to leave a like. If you didn't, the dislike button's right next to it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.